Welcome to the place of rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. Virginia and Katherine Dang discuss the importance of each of us stepping into rest to heal on a personal level and a national level. We hope you enjoy today's conversation.
Katherine, thank you for joining me this morning.
Always glad to be with you.
Wow, what a day to have an opportunity to speak with you, Katherine, of all people. Thank you for joining me.
You're most welcome, Virginia.
Katherine, big election yesterday, big year, big 4 years, big 8 years, big decade.
Yes, it was a shakeup, wasn't it?
Big shakeup. And given the nature of what I do, which is advance the cause of rest, relational, emotional, and spiritual truth, right? And always focused on displacing the confusion, chaos, and dis-ease that causes us unrest. You can only imagine. I couldn't wait to speak to you this morning. It just occurred to me that we have an incredible opportunity before us, because if there's anything that's transpired in the last 8 years, and certainly the last year, is an enormous amount of confusion, chaos, and dis-ease driven by a great deal of propaganda has emerged, and people are weary. They're just tired. And on both sides, I might add, tired. And we're weary of the political discourse, yet these principles of government have never been more important. So I'd like you to comment on this incredible opportunity on, first of all, what's transpired. And secondly, I'd like you to comment on the opportunity that's before us.
Well, for all of us, whether it's within ourselves or with our families, our friends, our whole society, we have been subject to a great deal of, I call dis-ease, a division, brokenness, and first and foremost, our relationships, the most immediate relationships within our own households. And we face that on a regular basis. And what we're going through on a larger degree, we have a brokenness within our nation. And it's reflected in our personal relationships. It's just cause and effect. And so there's a point of correction that is being, I think, administered as a consequence. And so we are struggling. We are definitely been struggling for a long time within our own nation, within our own societies, and within our own families. And this is why R.E.S.T is right on time with its healing work, which is dealing with first the cause of our diseases, and socially, politically, physically. So again, we need to understand what causes this confusion, this chaos within ourselves first, and the upset that some may feel because they know something is wrong, but it's not what sometimes we know and can identify.
And what I hear behind closed doors is the greater the angst, the greater the anger, the greater the frustration, the greater the hurt is always the path to resolve confusion and chaos within the individual person I'm working with within themselves.
Yes.
Then everything else they're dealing with becomes secondary. And the principles, the universal principles, the ideas are life-giving. And that's why we experience so much success and transformation so quickly. And I suppose last night, as I was watching the election results with the rest of the world, I felt so much love and compassion for the human condition. But specifically, we're a house divided, and everyone has some significant, valuable points to make on both sides that are legitimate. And I was so thankful last night that in spite of the heated debates, conversations, discussions we've had, that our love for each other and our desire to not sacrifice each other for the points we're making has endured. And I am thankful for that. And I couldn't help but desire that for our nation, that people would have the capacity in these times. I mean, let's face it, everyone's weary. There's a weariness upon us also. Some people are rejoicing in their weariness and some are afraid. And I want you to address that because that's a very real thing people are facing today.
Absolutely. But if you're at peace, there's no weariness. If you have a sense of understanding how to disagree and still agree at the same time, this is America. This is not some nation that is oppressed by an outside power. We are responsible for our own condition, whether it's personal or out from outside. And we're challenged. Our opinions are being challenged. We don't know why we have our own opinions. If you're satisfied with your own opinions, you have liberty to keep them and hold them. But I believe the struggle is we're not happy with our own opinions. And when they're challenged, we get offended. But you see, if you're satisfied and at rest with your property of yourself, your property of your ideas, you give liberty and you're given liberty to keep those to yourself and to live them out. And you give others the same liberty to value and prize and keep and protect their own opinions because no one is perfect in all ways. And I think even those that win, so-called, are weary because they have feared that their opinions might somehow be wrong on either side. There's wrong when there is adversarial relationships. You're both are wrong. And when I think about our own Civil War, which was division of a whole nation and the suicide, basically, of our own nation, they were wrong on both sides. The North was wrong, the South was wrong. And wherein they are wrong is their own responsibility to correct. And if there's correction to be made, it's with we, the people, are to correct our own opinions, our own thoughts. And we can reason with each other without breaking our relationship with each other.
And this is the self-evident truth that was foundational in establishing this republic.
Yes, because if your opinions are not grounded on common sense, self-evident truth, but maybe fantasy, idealism, romantic ideas, then you're not at ease. And you're afraid that maybe your opinions are unsound. But if you believe your opinions have merit, then you're not afraid because that which is fundamental to self-evident truth holds you stable and grounded.
So when people are contentious on either side of the spectrum with their position without giving the person they're engaging the respect due them, they're individuals too, you're saying that the conflict is within the person or both people that are contentious towards each other. So that's what's destructive.
Well, they're both in fear. They have no faith in what their opinions are. And that's our problem. We're both not at ease. And we know something is wrong. We just don't know who is wrong or what is wrong. And that has to do with the fact that we're uncertain about our own opinions and beliefs. You have to establish your own property. Those are your private, personal concepts, ideas, and beliefs. If you have no confidence in your own opinions, you're going to be contentious.
And I want to invite us all to be careful about the commentary and the analysis that we're all listening to. It's also shallow. It's also limited because they don't understand these universal principles that are governing time, that are universal. They're the design of God woven into the tapestry, I always say, of our very anatomy. And when there's manipulation, greed,
Mm-hmm.
when people sell out, by the way, and there's been sellout, greed, manipulation on both sides.
Well, we're human, and that's why we are responsible for our own selves, and we're not to meddle or impose any idea that that belongs to other people. But starting in the family, starting in our friendships, where we're looking for someone who is not in opposition. Well, there is no opposition to what is true. If it's true, it holds.
Explain that.
If you don't know what is true, you're going to be full of fear that that it might hold. You can't stand, and confidence, and you're not comfortable. And all the arguments we've had politically are just issues of unsettled truth. And we're being lazy. We haven't examined ourselves. What is it that I stand on? And am I standing on sand, or am I solid rock and ground where I cannot be moved? Because truth never falls. It always stands. History teaches us there are truths that will never, there are facts and principles that will never fade away. They just get challenged, but they continue without us, whether we hold them or not.
And the world just watched that on full display.
You see, we hear common sense, but I can trace common sense to common law. And from common law, we can go back to self-evident truth. We've lost the vocabulary of liberty. And so common doesn't mean what the people believe. Common means it is self-evident. It doesn't have to be explained. It is true for every human being that has ever lived and will live.
Can you explain common sense, common law, and that being the foundation of this republic?
Or self-evident truth. We're all born with that knowledge of what is natural, what is true to creation, true to every human being's makeup, and that is within them, their mind and their heart, which sometimes we overlook, and not just physical, but it is, again, the inner part, the inner man, the soul of man. And so as we think about common law or common sense, it's what's something that you know intuitively. It doesn't have to be explained. It's what has always been and always will be. But we have been distracted from that knowledge, that common natural truth. If we examine ourselves, what is the basis for our actions? What do you hold to be natural and good, such as evident to every human being? And that's our common, you can call it common ground, but our humanity. What is reasonable? I think we have to go back to what is reasonable, not emotional, not a simple outcome or result, but again, foundational, from birth to death.
Rest is about healing. It's about displacing confusion, chaos, and disease, and healing. And everything you just explained can bring so much healing to the individual, to their primary relationships, to their spheres of influence, to every structure of authority. We can heal the hemorrhaging heart of this nation in one generation if, instead of evaluating everything as being right or left, democratic or republic, if we could begin to reason through universal principles, I think both sides would see the flaws in their own arguments, in their own positions, and how they live and how they love and how they behave, because it's bigger than public policy.
Well, flaws. But what is good in us? And that is, being critical is looking for faults, and we even condemn ourselves for our own weaknesses and faults. But the good in us is what we're responsible for, what we do know, not what we don't know. And from birth, you know nothing, actually, until you are taught or you learn or follow, by example, things that are life-giving, things that nourish the heart and the mind in life-giving ideas and thoughts. And so what in you is not life-giving? What is destructive? What is critical? And when we're criticizing ourselves, we learn to criticize each other instead of, again, viewing the fact that we respect where we are, where each of us are in our development, in our understanding, in our education. And respecting each man, again, is protected in their life and their liberty to think what they want and to live the way they wish, without criticism, without condemnation. It's mutual respect. It's not just one way, one street, one-way street. It's a two-way street, give and take towards each other. And patient, love covers a multitude of faults. And we've lost the natural love that we ought to have for each other's lives, the value and worth of every man's opinion. It's their private property, and we're not to trespass on it or to violate it. And this is what we cherish in America.
You said something that really caused me to think. The beginning point, the starting point, because I'm always thinking about our listening audience. What's something tangible that they can walk away with? And you said the starting point is what is good in us. What is life-giving in us? What do you know to be the highest good, right? You're responsible for that, not the things that you don't know.
Yes.
I understand you to say that when we do not recognize what is good in us, what is life-giving in us, without and having measures of grace for our own ignorance, the things we don't know, right? Then we're not going to be dumbfounded, stupefied, and really assault ourselves or each other in this discussion of trying to make sense of what's happening. If we don't make sense of what's happening within us, if we don't understand ourselves and aren't willing to do business with our own convictions and our own conscience, that's where we show up with contention in relationship and in discussions.
Why are we at war with each other? Because we are at war within ourselves.
That's right.
Yourselves. You're struggling with something, and that demonstrates and manifests itself with your argumentativeness. You pick up offenses when there's no offense intended because you're so protective and insecure in your own position. Where do you stand? Do you stand on something that will sustain that hope and that love that you have for yourself? That protection, are you covered with clothing that does not make you vulnerable to anything that challenges your life itself? And that's what we have been feeling, is lives feel vulnerable, unprotected. Why? Is government doing its job, or is it distracted from the purpose of government, which is to protect and to punish? That's all. To punish those that do evil against another man, and protect those who do good, which is to preserve and to value the worth of each individual and respect each other without doing harm to the other person. It's just like your body is projecting what's going on inside of you. The disease, the physical, anatomical manifestation of your own conflict is in your body. I mean, they're not disassociated, soul and body. We are soul and body. And if your soul, your heart, your affections are not grounded on what is good and natural, then you're going to be destructive to yourself, your decisions, your choices. And we have been experiencing our choices and elections for the past 100 years that have led us to a point of self-destruction as a nation. And our families are divorcing, and our children are leaving and dying, and we need healing. But we're experiencing manifestations of something that needs to be resolved within each of ourselves. How did we get here? I believe it's through miseducation, not misinformation. It's miseducation because we have denied that inward part of us, our intellect. Our affections are not natural, and we're deviating, and then brokenness comes from the deviation of self-evident truth. And common sense is a good word. That's all we know. we don't have the language, appropriate language, so it comes up very crude, very rude, very rough, and very offensive. There's a lack of kindness and gentleness because we're unsettled and insecure. And so we get very fearful that somehow we're losing something. Yes, we're losing something, but we don't know how to communicate it without, again, being offensive.
Because we're so deregulated within ourselves and we don't understand that the role of these constituents we have, our spirit, our soul, and our body, and what it means, why it's so important to be balanced, because then most basic to our responsibility is to protect and advance our own life. It's to take responsibility to protect and advance our life, just like government. When you were talking about the role of civil government, I thought, well, isn't that the responsibility of every person to do for themselves and their children? And we're not doing it.
That's self-government. The good in all of us is life itself. It's so precious to be able to move and speak and love and to enjoy the activities that come with good living, a healthy life, and being healed and restored when we're not well. And, the cure is worse than the disease. And man has addressed the wrong thing, which is the anatomical aspect, without really, we've disassociated the inward part from the outward part when they're all one whole working, operating together.
Where do you begin? Where does a person, well, I think I'm answering my own question. We begin with ourselves. That's, I think, foundational to this conversation, because I was going to get too big and abstract. You can begin healing the hemorrhaging heart of your generation by really taking to heart these principles that Katherine just mentioned. The role of government and the primary sphere of government is contained within your soul. The role of government is to protect life and advance it. And are the decisions you're making about yourself protecting and advancing the health, the life of your spirit, your soul, and your body? If you are not protecting and advancing the life of your spirit, your soul, and your body, your body bears witness, by the way, your conscience bears witness of this, by the way, then you're going to become very agitated and adversarial and destructive to yourself, those you love, those are in your sphere of influence, and you're going to engage in this political discourse, in this heated political climate with a lot of contention. So we invite you to reconsider how you're governing yourself, what's happening in here, so you can show up whole, stable, and then extend your husband, your wife, your children, those in your sphere of influence, the same respect and decency, frankly, and love that you extended yourself. Then it becomes easy to love.
That's why if you care and love for the gift of life that is you, then you learn to care and love for those with their lives as well. It is amazing that love of self first, proper love, is not selfishness. It's, again, feeding and caring and protecting that precious thing called a singular life, that you know how to care for others. But we have such disdain and disrespect of ourselves, and we embarrass ourselves, we shame ourselves, we reveal the parts that are private where it should be kept within, that we expose ourselves. So we have to deal with what is in you that is governing you, to not care about you first and loving your neighbor then secondary. If you hate yourself, you're going to live with that hate out into your relationships. And that's cause and effect. You can't get away from that.
I think the story of what's happened to a generation in America is an incredible measure of ignorance about these universal principles. And I think there's so much ignorance, and I'll say it again, people are just dumbfounded a little bit. And then ignorance feels like such an assault, and it's not. It's something to have compassion in ourselves and others. But in that state of dumbfoundedness, we double down sometimes and we slip into this stupor. And that compounds sometimes the shame because we don't love ourselves. We think we should know, we should understand, we should be better, whether we recognize it or not. That's why we become so bitter, because instead of recognizing that ignorance is something that can easily be displaced with truth, we double down on ignorance. We become dumbfounded. We're in a stupor, and then we act like fools. And what do? We double down and we'll burn the house that we live in with us with us in it. And I kind of see what's happening in America and to a generation like that. And that's what's caused me to rise up and say, no, 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 no. Wait, look, this is what's happening. It's not that you're so bad and you're so wrong and I'm so right, or I'm so wrong and it isn't an issue of that. It's a point of really having the strength, the courage, the conviction to
reason within yourself.
Yes. Thank you. That is it. And rest invites people to do that at the molecular level when we're dealing with, to fight cancer. We do that at the nuclear, spiritual, at the nanoparticle level.
You have to understand that in each one of us, there is truth, but we have neglected referring to it. If we just rest, that's be still and reason within yourself. Reason with the truth you know. Is it true, or is it something you've been holding on to that is really untrue?
And the key to doing that, Katherine, I think, is being willing to face your own depravity, the conflict within yourself, and these conflicting narratives within yourself. And if you're not willing to accept the fact that you are a fallen, broken, limited vessel that does have these resources you just mentioned, but first you got to do business with yourself, bend the knee, be humble, and be willing to talk about those things so that you can heal.
There's a scripture verse that God gives us. He said, "Come to me and reason with me," without being combative. Reason with me and see if we can come to a conclusion about me, God, and about you.
Beautiful words to close with. I hope this wasn't too crazy and all over the place, but thank you for having this discussion with me. I feel so many things, but as an immigrant, I have such a profound love for this country and for humanity because I saw with my own eyes, I lived the brutality and the consequence of propaganda. And I believe that's the uprising we're seeing. People have had a gutful.
Why is America so appealing to the rest of the world, the good people of the world? I mean, seeking liberty, because they know they too have self-evident truth, that the way they're living is not true. This is a lie. I want to live in truth, and it's in me. And I find it the closest thing to that kind of living is in the United States of America. Historically, it is true.
Well, these principles are woven into the anatomy and the framework of what established this republic. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
Exactly.
That is the greatness of America, these ideas. Katherine, thank you so much.
Most welcome.
I love you to the moon and back. I do. I love you so much. And I thank you for persevering and dedicating your life as an immigrant yourself, as a child of immigrants to this country.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, Virginia.
We hope listening to this episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or for updates about R.E.S.T, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of R.E.S.T. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of R.E.S.T, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate. or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to Rest with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.